based on intelligence that is historically largely inaccurate. Innocent civilians are maimed and killed. These deaths are consistently unreported. These fatal mistakes continue to be made during the duration of my time in Iraq. As the leadership of my unit suffered the inevitable consequences of deployment to a combat zone, the psychological effects were apparent. They began to glamorize war. The platoon sergeant of my medical company would show a video called Collateral Murder to junior enlisted soldiers. If you're not familiar with this video, this is the documentation of real footage of Iraqi civilians being killed by Apache helicopter pilots, and then the people coming to provide them assistance were killed as well. And when he would show this footage to our junior enlisted soldiers, he would cheer as if our team were winning in a football game. My peers have since collaborated that this kind of conditioning to violence happens every day in deployed zones. The Marine convoys continued daily, later to take me to a detainment camp in Southwest Asia in Iraq. At a satellite base, my assignment was to provide medical care to the detainees in this camp. However, when I reached the gate, I was approached by a large guard, who told me that I was not allowed to touch any of these people, nor was I to be provided a translator, which severely constricts the ability to provide any kind of medical attention. So to give you an idea of what this camp looked like, this particular camp that I spent some time in, I'll walk you through it. To my right as I approached were 6 plywood boxes about the size of a standing refrigerator, too short to stand up in, so the inhabitants of these boxes were forced to crouch in a very uncomfortable position for the time that they were there, which seemed to be a long time based on the excrement that was on the floor below them. Their heads were covered in burlap sacks, their hands zip-tied behind their backs, zip-tied at the neck. Above their heads for 24 hours a day, loud aggressive music was played as a torture and interrogation tactic, and they would occasionally be removed individually and taken to a more private area for further questioning. Beyond those cages was, and to give you an idea of the temperature in Iraq at this time, it was about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Beyond those cages was a 12-foot by 12-foot approximately cage, another cage. This held approximately 15 Iraqi men. The men were terrified and huddled in a corner farthest from the guard. I would want to think that if my country were going to do something so horrible to other human beings, it would be because they were a huge and immediate threat to the national security of this nation, to my parents and my family. And that's how I justified what I was seeing. But as I looked into the eyes of these detainees, I saw humanity and desperation and horror. And the only thing that my heart could think as I slid them a piece of candy and an aspirin when the guard wasn't looking is, I'm so sorry. I have come to find in further research, you can as well, that the intelligence used to apprehend these detainees is largely inaccurate and often leads to the torture of innocent civilians. Files obtained by the WikiLeaks website reveal the U.S. believes many of those tortured at Guantanamo Bay are innocent. After my third deployment, I worked in the intensive care unit in Landstuhl, Germany. In case you're not familiar with this medical facility, it's the stabilization facility for those soldiers injured in combat whose injuries are so severe that they would not survive the flight to Walter Reed. It was the same every day, 20 beds. 5 new, approximately 20-year-old Marines would arrive every day with bilateral leg amputations, third-degree head-to-toe burns. I found myself often without the surgical skills necessary to assist the doctors, so I would hold their hands as they would pass. And I remember their mothers weeping at their bedsides, asking why their father had told them to be a man, why he had called them weak, why their country had taken their sons. I'd like to take this opportunity to give a small testimony from a woman from Hawija Clinic in Iraq, a victim of our insurgency. In her words, I was unconscious for a month after the car hit me. I don't know anything. Until now, I don't remember the color of the car. And a man there explained that she was in a car, she and her husband in their car. The Americans were driving in front of them. They had blocked the road. A car came from the other side, and hit their car. It was not an accident. The row of American vehicles was moving and blocked the road, and she was in the car and her husband who was driving. And they had to make a turn because the Americans had pointed guns at them. There was a car approaching from the other side on the two-way street who was also afraid of the Americans. The two cars hit each other. The Americans did not respond or provide any assistance. This is common practice. People brought her to the hospital. I don't know her. I know her and her husband. There was movement in her legs, and there was a fracture and compression in her 12th vertebrae with the movement. You know, people lifted her off the street, so the 12th vertebrae hit the spinal cord, and she became paralyzed. This is something that's happened to, I would say if you went to Iraq today, you would be hard to find someone whose immediate family member hadn't suffered some sort of trauma to this extent. The U.S. occupation of Southwest Asia could be halted today if the people of the United States who are responsible for this government would rise up, would unionize and strike en masse against the atrocities that are being committed. But that is not happening today. Why is that not happening today? Every being that has occupied the spaces we attacked, American and Iraqi and Afghan, is a veteran of this insurgency, a veteran of war, and deserves the right to heal from this, deserves shelter and nourishment and medical attention. But we are not seeing that. What we are seeing is planning for continued invasion from the posture of global domination, a media blackout as to the actions of our government, and the corporate pillaging of the areas we destroy. The Department of War's actions span beyond human rights violations. The U.S. military is the #1 consumer of oil on the planet. The depleted uranium munitions used are considered weapons of mass destruction because of the radioactive material they disperse. The immediate withdrawal of deployed soldiers is a matter of national security and environmental urgency. Demanding full benefits for all returning veterans is a strategic platform to facilitate this withdrawal. Thank you.
Before you go, your name, please.
My name's Annetta Carr.
Spell your last name before.
Carman, C-A-R-M-A-N.
Thanks.
And my associate, yes, Jay. My associate and veteran friend, Lisa Ling.
Hi, my name is Lisa Ling, and I'm not going to tell you about all of my military service or any of that stuff. I'm not a combat veteran. I didn't carry a weapon. But I did participate in all of the atrocities that were spoken of, and I am ashamed. But what I do want to tell you is why we do this, why we come here and chalk. And it's very near and dear to my heart, because when I write down the names of the people in California who were killed in action, some of them are my friends, some of them I've known for a while. And I urge every one of you to walk around this block and read some of these names. Read about the store owner, read about someone on a bicycle, someone selling flowers, someone just doing ordinary everyday things that you and I would take for granted. It's a hazard. So I just want to say that while all of you are here and while there's attention being brought to this, please look down and see what's there in chalk. It's important because Americans, we need to know. And I'm hoping that the Right to Heal campaign will basically make us accountable. And it will begin the process of reparations, prioritize the healing of service members, veterans, and the people of Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Farah Musa. She's a citizen from Iraq. Farah?
Good afternoon. My name is Farah Mohsen al-Musawi. I'm an Iraqi citizen. I've been here since 2008. Before that, I was a refugee in Damascus, Syria. And today I'm going to read you a personal account of the night of March 19th. It was hard for me to sleep last night as I heard the ringing of the sirens of war in my ears, as if it just happened, as if 2003 had never passed. I relived that night once again for the last 10 years. I still remember the light of the bombs beaming through the room and followed by a strong shake that was enough to make me and the rest of the world believe that this is the beginning of the end. I still remember how the smoke from the explosions and the debris spread everywhere, turned everything into black. I remember I couldn't breathe. remember the horror of the explosions, reciting my prayers every night as if it was the last night of my life, secretly saying goodbye to my family before I go to sleep, because I never know if I will be alive the next morning. And then I remember when I had to leave Iraq 2 months after, because the Shia militias didn't like what they saw in Iraq and threatened to kill people left and right. I remember I was told to pack my suitcase and leave Iraq because it was not safe anymore. I remember the trip that I took with my family on our way to Syria. I remember the demolished houses, the dead bodies on the ground, the black smoke in the sky, the strange men in uniform carrying guns in their hands and grins on their faces, marching down the streets of my city as if it belonged to them. Then I remember taking one last look at Iraq before I had to leave for good. I remember turning around, bound to its glory that faded behind the fires of explosions and the screams of crying children. I remember seeing Iraq on the TV screen from exile, watching politicians pull it left and right, changing it to become democratic and accomplishing the mission of destruction of a whole nation. It has been a decade since I left, and for the past 10 years, signs of democracy have yet to be shown. Yes, Iraqis were allowed to vote, but they only voted out of fear. Yes, there are over 1,000 newspapers, magazines and TV channels, but they only broadcast what their political funders want them to show. Yes, we have a parliament that is lacking adequate representation of the Sunnis, the Christians, the Sabi'as, and other secularists and minorities. Yes, we have free trade, a free trade that was only free for Iran to use Iraq as its market and a second base to execute its plans of expansion in the region, all with the blessing of our allegedly elected Prime Minister. Yes, we have an open economy, open only for Western investors, as to take as much oil and resources as they can, as long as they pump dollars in the politicians' personal bank accounts. Yes, we have a judicial system that only implements the laws of revenge and bloodthirsty warlords, executing Iraqis without any conviction, sentencing thousands without prosecution. Yes, women in Iraq can speak. They can speak about anything but politics or the economy or social justice or religion or longing for a safe environment to raise their children. Allow me to read you a paragraph of a liberated Iraqi woman who just recently was released from one of the detention centers in Iraq, just to show you how liberated Iraqi women are today. And no, this is not one of Saddam Hussein's forgotten prisons, this is Noor al-Maliki's prisons. She says, "A few days ago, the executioner released me from the unjust detention in the prisons of the shameful Safavids. The conviction was for terrorism or for Sunnism, as some of my fellow female detainees like to call Noor al-Maliki's notorious and infamous law. Yes, they knew that my real name was Hanan al-Mashhadani and not Hiba Shammari. And yes, they learned that I'm a doctor and not a journalist. But what they didn't learn was that I will come back after the long years in detention to tell the people what happens in al-Maliki's prisons and the deeds of his Safavid gangsters. I will publish my memoirs from prison, and I will tell you the horrific stories and news that will make you ashamed and disgraced. No, I will not lock myself in my room and mourn over the loss of my virginity. And I am the daughter of the virtuous homes of Iraq. Yes, they raped me time and again. They beat me up and kicked me. They insulted the men of Iraq and their honor. They spit on their pride. But I shall not be silenced. I will reveal the dirty and rotten laundry of al-Maliki and his dogs." This is a liberated Iraqi woman in Iraq today. Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand here with my partners in peace from Iraq Veterans Against the War to call on my right as an Iraqi to hold the following names accountable for all the war crimes that have been committed against my people. The names are George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, Paul Wolfowitz, Robert Gates, George Tenet, Zalmay Khalilzad, Generals Johnny Abizaid and David Petraeus, Nouri Kamal al-Maliki and his cabinet, Ammar al-Hakim and Muqtada Sadr,
And there are many, many other names that I could not mention today. I hold all of these people accountable for what has happened in my country, for all the destruction, the trauma, the killing, the imprisonment, and the torturing of thousands of innocent Iraqi men and women, for exploiting the resources in favor of foreign oil companies, and many more. The war is not over until all US troops are pulled out of Iraq and the corrupt Iraqi government that was placed by the occupation to be gone. The war is not over until our rights to heal are met, and we stand in solidarity hand in hand achieving this goal. Nelson Mandela said once, if you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy, then he becomes your partner. Today we don't stand here as enemies, but partners in peace to end the injustices that were committed in the name of unholy wars. Thank you very much.
Next, we're going to have Scott Olson and Annetta Carmen step forward to read some testimony from Iraqis who were affected by the war. This is a testimony from Fallujah regarding the lasting effects that the weapons we have used are still having. During the American military invasion at the end of 2004, the American Army used radioactive weapons, and they admitted that they used white phosphorus in the bombing of the city. And after about a year and a half, birth defects began to appear in the city, especially in residential neighborhoods far from the city center, such as Askari, Golan, El-Shuhada, Gubail, Sinai, Dubat, Andalus, and Al-Rafsi neighborhoods. The Iraqi Ministry of Environment performed a survey of the city, and they found a presence of radioactive, poisonous, and harmful materials which cause cancer and deformities. Then a number of Iraqi parliamentarians asked to put this city under the category of regions that have been subjected to genocide. However, political disagreement did not allow for the city to be regarded with this status, which would have allowed it to open a center that is specialized in treating cancer and exposure to radioactivity. A doctor at the maternity hospital indicates that there exists more than 12 cases a month, and most of the time, the baby or fetus dies due to missing organs. The Fallujah hospital is still refraining from speaking to the media regarding deformities that are represented in pictures that were taken in the city's hospital at the end of 2008 by Abed Al-Salam Khalid, a journalist, human rights activist, and resident of Fallujah.
So this is in reference to the same situation with depleted uranium radiation contamination in Iraq. After the huge spread of cases of cancer in the country of Iraq, the government realized that they have to declare some measures. The Iraqi government declared on Saturday, August 17th of last year that they are forming a high national committee to lead a large campaign to fight the spread of cancer in the country. A government representative, Ali Al-Dabag, said that the cabinet decided to form a national committee led by the Minister of Environment along with the Minister of Health and the Minister of Human Rights, as well as 2 representatives from organizations of civil society that are specialized in fighting cases of the spread of cancer. And he made clear that the committee's goal is to implement a national campaign to stop the causes of the spread of cancer and cure the difficult causes by seeking treatment outside the country. Dabag mentioned that the committee will fully use all of its ability for the success of its mission with the help of local, independent, and civil organizations. Although many months have passed since this announcement, none of the residents of the areas affected by cancer have spoken about any measures taken by the government towards eliminating the disease or doing examinations for the increased number of people who have been affected. It is clear that it was just an announcement of government intervention in the humanitarian crisis for the sake of silencing complaints.
To end this press conference, Emily Yates, a veteran of the U.S. Army, is going to speak.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Yates. I spent 2 separate tours in Iraq outside of Baghdad as a member of the 3rd Infantry Division's Public Affairs team. It was part of my job to tell all of the soldiers the Army side of the story, to tell as many people as would listen the Army side of the story. Let me give you an example of what that meant. In 2005, during my first tour to Iraq, I went out on a night raid as a journalist for the military to cover the night raid. During that raid, the team I was with broke into several houses but didn't catch any of its targets that were intended. What they did succeed in doing was disrupting family sleep and breaking in a lot of doors and traumatizing entire neighborhoods. The story I was told to write the next day was not about the team I went out with, but it was about the other teams. It was about several of the other teams who had gone out the same night and had detained many people, 90-something people. My assignment was to write that we had detained 90-something people. There was no mention of the people whose intelligence was bad, who traumatized families for no reason. And there was no mention of whether or not the people we detained were actually guilty of anything. They had just been detained. And the next day, when I went to take pictures of them sitting outside the detention facility, nobody was talking to them. They were just sitting in a line with zip ties around their ankles, and some of them with blindfolds. And it was not liberating what we were doing, and we weren't making anybody safer in that instance. But my job was to say how safe we had made the job, or we made the region. 2 years later, during my second tour in Iraq, I went out on a patrol with another unit, and they were doing what they called neighborhood visits, and basically it was a group of soldiers and a group of Iraqi police officers going around paying visits to people's houses. And the houses they were visiting in the middle of the day often had children home, and the children just sort of hung out around, and I tried to imagine what I would have felt like if I was a 7 or 8-year-old child, and one day I was sitting at home minding my business, and 7 or 8 large men with weapons showed up at my door, and I couldn't see their faces, and they were asking for my father, and you know, whether or not their intentions are good, the effect of that is a country full of children who are growing up knowing nothing but soldiers coming to their door in the middle of the day. And when I came home, I've been home now for almost 5 years, and I still think about Iraq and my role in the war every single day. And I had the luxury of leaving Iraq, and now coming home and working with my colleagues standing behind me and around me on peace activism, and that is one of the ways I'm able to heal from my experience. And I have that luxury, but millions of Iraqis do not have that luxury. And I get to know that more and more. I'm a student at UC Berkeley now studying the Middle East, and everything I study and everything I learn confirms for me that there was no just reason for us to go into Iraq. There was no reason other than a select few people's bank accounts for us to go into Iraq. And I'm standing here today because
there are lots and lots of Iraqis here in Iraq and who've been killed who are not able to stand here today and say, hey, we're still at war, and veterans are still at war, because the war doesn't go away once you come home from it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming here today, but it would be remiss if we let you guys go without mentioning that we would not be standing here today if it wasn't for some other groups, and that's the Center for Constitutional Rights, Civilian Soldier Alliance, the Organization for Women's Freedom in Iraq, the Federal Council of Workers and Unions in Iraq. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
See you guys.